Are you prepared for what will happen when your elderly parents or relatives need a bit of extra help or care? Have you thought about it or talked with them about what that might even look like? It's a tough conversation, but it's one that a lot of people are going to need to be having soon as Australia's population is ageing pretty quickly. So what are your options if you're in that situation, and how can you prepare for this phase of life? That's today on Money and a Good Life. My name's Stephanie Coombs and I'm here with my co-host and money expert, Ryan Watson. Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Steph. Great to be back.
Yeah, it is. And I reckon that there's a lot of people who are going to get something out of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard Nick speak before and I know he speaks from the heart. So I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's introduce Nick then. He's Nick McDonald, the founder and CEO of Prestige Inhome Care. He's a passionate advocate for living independently at home and is no stranger to the media. Nick, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hey, good day, and great to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Well, let's get into it. One of the biggest challenges we see in the aged care sector is that people just don't really want to think or talk about aged care, sometimes until they're in a crisis situation. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's human nature that we don't want to sort of think about things like funeral planning or giving up your independence. We don't want to think about needing help, and often as we age and you see that down the line, people are even more resistant to talking about it. But the reality is, if you wait until you're in a crisis, it's a terrible time and you just don't get the same sort of outcome. So we are big advocates for people having these conversations at the right time.
So what can happen if you leave it to a crisis? Does that just mean that you have fewer options, or you have to maybe leap into something that isn't your first choice?
All of that, yeah. I mean, firstly, there's often many stakeholders involved. So we deliver care to people in their own homes, primarily older people, but also some younger people with disabilities. So if we're looking after Mary in her own home, she may have a husband, she may have multiple children, perhaps even grandchildren. They're all kind of engaged in trying to make sure Mary's well looked after at home. In a crisis, all of those people are going through different emotions. You know, your mum or your grandma's perhaps had a fall, lucky to come out of hospital, not quite herself, can't drive anymore. All of this stuff puts people into a bit of a tailspin, and to be trying to make decisions with those emotions flying around is often really difficult. And certainly for siblings, we see a lot that the siblings don't realise they're not aligned until suddenly they're thrust into it. And I think if you can have those conversations as siblings early and get in alignment with, what you think your parents or loved ones need, and to bring them in and make sure, to sanity check that, obviously that can take a little bit of time and it gets a better outcome.
Yeah. So what does early look like, Nick, when you say early?
Yeah, well, I think I'm 40. I'm turning 50 this year, and I've been talking to my parents about this for the last 20 years. I've been in aged care, especially in-home care, for 30 years, my whole career really. Yeah. And I don't think there's any time too early. And I think it's important to really understand what your parents' wishes are. And certainly, if you are the child of a parent that you start to see perhaps, not being able to go to the gym as much anymore, or, not wanting to do long drives, or, you start to see signs very early on, that's the time to have a chat about it. And I think, some of the tips that I'll give people is think about who has the chat. Like I'm one of 5 kids, and there's probably a couple of us that wouldn't be as good at it as the others. So, you can kind of work out who is best to have it. And then, like any conversation, it's kind of how. You don't just launch in and say, oh, you want to go to a nursing home or get care at home, or, do you want to be on life support? Like
it can be taken as being almost opportunistic. I know it's not, but what you're saying, normalise the conversation earlier.
Correct. And I think one of the things that helps is people are often resistant to, thinking about a really worst case scenario. Like we've got some clients where we provide care to them 24 hours a day, that they're not safe to be left alone even for 1 hour. And so that's pretty extreme, right? That's up one end of the spectrum, and people don't like to think about them perhaps being in that situation. But people usually will accept a little bit of help if it's something like a cleaner. You know, like some of us probably have a cleaner, right? And you're cool with that. And so, you know, how you have the conversation, I often say talk to someone about maybe are they happy to give up some of the cleaning or get someone to come and mow your lawns. Yeah. Stop trying to do that yourself.
More through a lens of not you can't, but more through how can someone help you?
Correct.
So maybe focus on more of the things that you enjoy doing.
Absolutely. And sometimes it gets to a point where, you know, people are still a bit resistant. And sometimes the thing that gets them over the edge is a family sort of having that hard conversation about, hey, Dad, if you don't start to get some of this help, you're going to have to move into a home. Like, they're the only options. Like, I can't keep coming and whatever, doing your meals for you, you know, or helping you with your shower in the morning, keeping an eye on you, make sure you're safe. If you don't get some help, the alternate is a home, and often that's when people go, okay, crikey, I'll take a little bit of help, stay here.
It might seem obvious, Nick, but where are the first places where people start with help? You mentioned around meals or maybe like what's, I suppose, the light version of help, if that makes sense? Our
business delivers a whole range of things, from really sort of technical nursing in the home, lots of personal care. That's probably where the biggest demand is. But we also have people who specialise in cleaning, and we've got a team – we call it home and garden maintenance, but they'll put up smoke alarms, they'll put up rails, they'll do lawns, trim hedges, and it's probably that end of the spectrum, the home and garden maintenance, that people are really happy to engage with. And, you know, probably next, shortly behind that would be, you know, someone to help with cleaning the house.
Yeah.
When I think about that sort of care, I would expect that to be extremely expensive, right? Because that sort of was how it was in the past. I mean, the homes were sort of the option, but that's kind of changed recently, hasn't it? The Australian government is focusing a little bit more on in-home care. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that'd be great for listeners to be aware of is that there is a lot of support out there financially. There's a lot of funding going into care in the home. Both the, you know, people are familiar with the NDIS and how, you know, that's not gone well in certain areas, but the outcomes for some of the people receiving the care are enormous, and they often get overshadowed by some of the negative press. But there's a tremendous amount of funding to keep people with disabilities in home, and there's also increasing funding to keep older people at home. You know, the government's realised it's way more affordable to deliver care to someone in their own home than having to fund the building of, you know, bricks and mortar institutions. And fortunately, that's what the client wants as well. That's what people want. So when what the government wants and what people wants align, it often ends up in a really good solution.
Yeah, it happens so infrequently.
Yeah, and because the importance about keeping them, the longevity, they want to be in their home as long as they want that autonomy and that freedom, right?
For sure. I mean, it's pretty rare that someone wants to move into a nursing home. Sometimes it is the best the best outcome, if you like, for a particular family member. But most people want to stay in their own homes. This is sort of the reason why I got into this, that I saw too many people as a nurse. You know, that's where I started my career, nursing, and I just saw too many people sort of, okay, you have to move to a nursing home now. I thought, why is there a have to? And so I think that there's certainly a groundswell of people wanting to get the care at home. You talked about the cost, though, that, you know, everyone is eligible for government-funded aged care. You've got to go through an assessment process. So if you're super fit and well, they'll probably say you're not ready for it yet. But if you do actually need some help, there's at the minute 4 sort of different funding levels. And come July, that's moving to 8. So there has been some big changes in that space. But it means that you don't have to dip into your own pocket. So, you know, traditionally, I think if you wanted this care, by and large, you kind of had to dip into your own pocket. And for some people, that just wasn't an option. And unfortunately, they were faced with, okay, well, you got to move out of your place.
And what has this meant for the industry? How have these changes sort of impacted aged care in Australia?
It's definitely put like aged care on the map. I think we had a Royal Commission into aged care not too long ago that got a lot of media attention. You know, some of the positives to come out of that was that we need to do better for older Australians. And as you talked about at the outset, the population, that baby boomer population, we're now a few years into those people actually being in the bracket of needing care. So, you know, it's only really just the beginning. But I think it's it's created more money into the industry, which is great. It's created greater competition, which gives, people a lot of choice around, what sort of care they want and who they get it from. And I think that it's brought the awareness to families, and, it's what we were talking about earlier. It's brought the awareness to families that you do have options. And so way more people now ring us, and they knew full well that they could look at care in the home. We used to be out there singing it from the rooftops just to make sure people realised they had a choice, whether they come to us or someone else, so long as they knew they didn't have to move into a facility.
I mean, I think it's very positive. As you said, most people want to keep a certain level of their own routines. There are exceptions, but home is where the heart is. And there's also, I think, for a lot of the family members involved, they don't want to lose the family home either. And they don't want to have to wrap that up because it's where there's a lot of sort of emotional investment, which I think sort of is not a bad time to talk a little bit about estate planning and how you sort of bring your family into that conversation. What do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Nick talked earlier about, normalising the aged care or care for your parents as well. The estate planning one is a lot like money as well. So we need to normalise the conversations around that. It was interesting hearing Nick talk earlier about what I heard a little bit around stakeholder management. You've got different levels of family. You've got multiple siblings. Who has the conversation as well? So I was really buoyed by having the conversation sooner and normalising that as well.
You're dealing with families, I think, a lot who are in this situation where they're deciding what the next step is. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making at this time?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost is probably the issue we talked about earlier around not planning for this stuff. So I think that's one that we can try and keep reminding people, get these conversations happening earlier and understand what your parents want and educating them about what's available. I think getting on the same page early, as we said earlier, when you're not in the midst of a crisis and everyone's a little bit emotional and you got to do it quick. Unfortunately, it's a real minefield. If you just go online and look for care in the home, it's impossible.
Well, even, Nick, when you said NDIS is going from 4 levels to 8, I automatically think double the complexity.
Yeah, for sure. Those the aged care packages are going from 4 to 8, but if people can't wrap their head around 4 or how to get in and who do I choose.
Paperwork.
Lots of paperwork, especially around, even for care in the home, there is an income tested element. So if you can afford to contribute, you are expected to contribute, what's sort of comparatively a small amount. But it's a complex landscape. And the government sort of built a website called My Aged Care, and that was supposed to be the sort of single source of the truth. Mm-hmm. And it's also a bit of an entry point for residential care and for home care. So if you want to get an assessment, say, for your parent, you go, we're going to get onto this early. You'd go through My Aged Care, but it's been refined over the last couple of years, but it's still a lot of feedback around a very complex way of understanding what's available, how to get it. And then there's clearly a whole bunch of, private providers out there trying to get that digital awareness and to capture that, consumer that's searching and, share with them the information that they think they need to know. So it's super complex.
So My Aged Care is a good place to start. Does that give you an idea of all the providers who are out there?
Yeah, they've done that reasonably well. You can search for providers in your area. All providers have to be pretty transparent around pricing, the services they offer, what they cost, etc. And so you can see that now as a client or a consumer. You can sort of really look at who's out there. There's a lot of feedback. For residential care, there's like a star rating system. They're talking about bringing that into in-home care, which I think will be good. So I think it gives people the ability to try and understand what's out there. And I'd then encourage them to ring a few, ask a few questions, and pretty quickly you'll work out, who's the sort of provider that's going to fit well for you.
So just on that, Nick, what would be the first 3 questions that you would ask if you're doing it? Obviously, you're an expert and you're in this profession. Yeah. Where should people start? What questions?
Yeah, well, I think firstly, you want to know what sort of services do you deliver, because some providers will just do that cleaning side, or they'll just do nursing, or what actually can you deliver, and what would we still need to go and get from somewhere else. the pricing side is important, because at the minute there's still some flexibility for providers in terms of what they will charge clients.
Are there any red flags, things for people to be wary of? The star rating system for residential care is a good start if you've got a low star rating. Are there any other signs people should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, we always focus on one of our strengths being how long we've been doing this. So, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, there was, I think, 900 approved providers for government-funded care. There was probably another handful that didn't do government-funded care and just did private care. But, if we talk about the government side of things, there was 900. Today, there's 2,100 and something. So, it's more than doubled. So you think about a lot of the people you're ringing, they've just got into this industry. So, hopefully a lot of them are in it for the right reasons and have lots of great leaders that understand, what these people need. But certainly I'd be making sure that, whoever you're speaking to, just because they've got a glossy, brochure or an amazing website, that they've actually got the capacity and capability to deliver for you and know what you need.
You would have seen the industry change a lot in 20 years, like a lot very recently. Where do you think it's going next?
I think it's very clear that both sides of government have an appetite for increased care at home, especially with the elderly. I think that will actually translate into more acute care as well. So for younger people, things that you would probably go into hospital for now, you will be able to get, in the future at home. And hospitals, you'll largely just be in there for surgery. Everything else you should really be able to get at home. So I think that will be a market change. I think the NDIS, as a program, will continue to improve. I think they've done really well so far to identify some of the loopholes that were exploited, shut them down, and ensure that more of the funding goes to care and services and equipment for people that really need it. And I think the greater awareness for people and, as we're talking about, younger people having conversations with their parents early, I think you're going to see far more people understanding what's available and staying at home. Even we deliver palliative care to people in their own home. So, you can kind of stay at home until the very end. And for most people, why wouldn't you want to?
Yeah, exactly right. And it does remind me, Nick, of a story of, one of our clients at Tribeca over the last 18 months, and one of our advisors had an appointment, and they're in their 80s, and it was about the ongoing maintenance around the house, and they were trying to do it all themselves, and they'd concluded that they needed to sell the home because they couldn't do that. Now, working with the advisor, they actually financially afford to get in care like yours, which is going to increase their longevity in that home by at least 5 to 7 years. The joy that they walked out of that appointment with, because they get to stay in the comfortable surrounds. It's fantastic.
If you speak to, I go out and see our clients still, and you speak to people about what their home means to them, and it's different for everyone, but there's definitely consistent themes, and it's around memories, their own, their bed or their pillow or, their own kitchen, all of that stuff.
The kids that grew up in the house, the grandkids.
Correct.
Or you might have the heights measured of your kids,
100%. Yeah. And, as sad as it is, kids and grandkids do not visit grandparents in nursing homes nearly as much as they will in the family home.
That is such a good point.
I had the unfortunate situation of having my own mum in a nursing home for 4 or 5 years. She passed away a couple of years ago. I'd go in there all the time, but I'm in the industry and I've spent my life around nursing homes and aged care and all that, and I still had to sort of steel myself to go in there. It's a bit like visiting someone in hospital. You go because you love the person, you want to support them, but you kind of can't wait to get out of there. It's still an institution, whereas you're going to the home you grew up in and, mum, regardless of how capable or...
You know where the kettle is, you know where the biscuits are, you can sit down at the family table or in the kitchen. Yeah, the familiarity.
Yeah,
Correct.
and you wander around. That's the other thing. When you're in a care facility, you feel very trapped in the room. There's a lot of sort of intensity, I think, often.
For sure.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about palliative care, and I think that is an interesting topic because I understand that this is something that you're quite passionate about. Why is it, do you think, important that palliative care can be delivered at home where possible?
Well, it sort of goes back to why we started the business, just making sure people could get the care they need at home and not have to go into a facility And whether that's aged care and not going to a nursing home, or whether it's an acute sort of medical situation and not having to go to a hospital, or being able to come out of hospital sooner. But there's no different for palliative care. Like, it's horrific to think that someone, if they don't want to, would have to go for their last days or weeks and live in a palliative care institution, have their loved ones come and visit them in there, like you said, in a little room. They might have a nice sort of communal area, but like no one likes that experience. Whereas if you can have the people around you that you love in your own home, I've spoken to these families and to people who are terminal and are getting care at home, and it means more to them just about anything. Yeah. So having seen it and felt it, the sort of human emotion side of that, I'm like, well, people should have that choice.
I'm hearing dignity and respect, Nick.
For sure.
What people want.
Correct. And, yeah, unfortunately, when you're at that point of your life, you know, what car you got in the driveway or how much money you got in the bank, and all that stuff just peels away. And having your grandkids want to come and see you and spend time with you, and, you know, having your kids swing by on their way home from work, that stuff is invaluable.
It's such an interesting point. Because, you know, you do think that it's just so much more natural to go buy a house, right? And I haven't actually thought about it, but you're right. Having had family members who are in aged care facilities, it doesn't matter how much you love them. It is hard. It's hard to rustle up the enthusiasm for it.
Nick says he has to steel himself, and he's used to that
environment. Yeah, and you're in the industry. It doesn't say everything. But, you know, it's funny. This conversation has actually left me quite optimistic. Because I think that for so long, aged care, and as the Royal Commission did show, there was a lot of stuff that was pretty unsavoury about the aged care industry. But I think knowing that there is actually a future where we've got more people in their own homes surrounded by the stuff that they know and the familiarity, that's really positive. I'm feeling optimistic. I imagine you are as well.
I love hearing that from you, because, I mean, that's what I want to hear from people. You know, I want people to know this is an option and think, geez, that's great. You know, when I get to that age, no way am I going to go into a home. I'm going to get this at home. And, you know, people thinking that way and looking forward to it and feeling, oh, thank God we got an option. Like, even if you are super unwell or if you're terminal, knowing, you know, looking down the barrel of that, but knowing and picturing that experience in your own home, that's pretty special.
Everyone loves to know that they have options. That's, I think, in terms of, if I was to guess, Steph, why you're feeling well, a lot of people who are probably listening who think they or feel they don't have options, or their family members, there's plenty out there, and there's good people out there who are helping as well.
I also just think that I think that it was for a while. Aged care was something people didn't want to talk about, and it was grim. But actually was. And like a lot of the aged care facilities were grim. And you know, my grandmother was in a dementia care unit, and it was a genuinely awful time for all involved. And I think that that's where maybe, and knowing that things are changing and possibly improving means that we might actually just lose the stigma. This might just be a generational thing, and then we'll have forgotten that it was ever kind of as sad as it was.
Well, because as Nick said earlier, it's never been more important. We've got this aging population. So we've got people who need more help.
But you know what? If we're lucky, we'll all get old. You know, this is the thing that will affect all of us. It's not an intellectual thing. If we're lucky, aging is a privilege.
Well, and I'm 44 years of age, and the average life expectancy for me is 100.
Yeah, it's a long time.
It is no way are you making 100. You daredevil.
So, Nick, we've gone 31 minutes and we've kept it professional.
No, I think that you're spot on, and also that's people don't want to talk about dying or you know, right back to the start of this conversation. You know, how do you talk to your parents and you bring it up and they don't want to talk about it? Everyone is aging, wherever you are on that. Like, everyone's going to get old, and I'd say that to people. You might not need this now. That's cool. We're talking about whether it's 1 year, 10 years, or 30 years. At some stage. Yeah. If you need help, you know, what does that look like?
And I'm sure it's not lost on you, Steph, but where we get to a lot on this podcast is just normalising conversations.
I know, it does.
People connecting and people speaking.
Yeah, it does. It always starts with a conversation. I think also as well, making your own wants and needs known too, thinking about what it means for you at a certain age.
Well, if you're the parent in this scenario listening to this podcast, making sure you understand what you want and that your wishes are absolutely met. Otherwise, it's left slightly to the unknown, or your kids, or maybe your wider family.
And And I mean, if you're having that conversation with your kids now, for example, that takes a big burden off them, and it's just a normalised conversation. It takes some of that pain and edge off it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And you know, we didn't mention that earlier, but we can't assume that people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, won't be listening to this, don't have the intellectual capacity to actually go, you know what, I'm going to start the conversation with my 40, 50-year-old child and say, hey, I don't know what you think I want when I get to this stage, but this is what I'm thinking. Like, yes, you might not want to talk about it, but I think you know in your heart that that might happen one day, and you might as well get your wishes clear now.
Well, also, Nick, it might motivate them to potentially reach out to someone like you as well. They'll take charge of what they want, and maybe they'll start getting help.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's other fantastic providers in the industry, but we often speak to families and they're very much just, we don't quite know what's going to happen, but Dad's got dementia, he's starting to sort of forget things. We don't really need help now, but we're just trying to do the research. And I'm like, great, you've got onto this early, and we can kind of talk to them about options. We can hold their hand, even if it means steering them to, you know, another provider or maybe into a nursing home if that's best for them. It doesn't matter whether we end up supporting them. I'm just grateful that people are getting care in the place that they choose.
Nick, I mean, there's so much information. Really appreciate your time. I think that if you're listening to this and you're wondering where to start, again, start with a conversation. Then maybe check out the government website, My Aged Care, and then go from there. And if you feel like you got some value out of this conversation, do make sure that you follow Money in a Good Life wherever you're listening to this podcast now so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you again next time. Advice given in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to influence decisions about investing or financial products. Our listeners should always seek their own professional advice that considers their own personal circumstances before making any financial decisions.